the really ugly truth is that most of us who are struggling in our business have not just one problem that's contributing to that, but a whole host. And so it's not just a single diagnosis. Unfortunately, I wish it was. But it's, an unraveling of things and trying to get to either the root problem or that lead domino that needs to fall.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Fine Homebuilding contributing editor and production manager at TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwann. Today I am joined by Jared Gossett, owner and president of Gossett Company and the host of the Building Optimal podcast. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Jared, thanks for joining me today. I've been a long-time listener of your show.
Ian, thanks for having me. Glad to be on.
To give our listeners an overview of the work that Gossett and Company does.
Yeah, so we're a custom home builder in Austin, Texas. We focus primarily on homes in the $3 to $7 million range, homes close into downtown, so in urban infill neighborhoods, primarily in West Austin, but we've built a little bit all over. And we do about 12 to 15 homes a year. That's kind of our start target. And of those, about 75% are going to be spec developments and about 25% custom for clients.
So you came to this industry from working in the finance sector and even obtaining a CFA certification. What does a CFA do, and how has that experience set you up for success in being a builder?
Yeah, it's funny because they're two pretty disparate paths. When I first got out of college, I thought, well, I wanted to be a hedge fund manager, kind of young, dumb, and ambitious. And I didn't have the university pedigree that you need for that. So had some good people counseling me at least. And they said, well, one of the ways you can try to show that you're worthy of getting into that game is going and getting the CFA charter. So wasted my early 20s doing that. And anyway, I got it. And, I remember last day that there's 3 levels, 3 tests. And I walked out of the test that last day after a full day of testing. It was a complete, beating. And I was like, wow, if somebody gave me $50 million to invest right now, I really wouldn't know what to do with it. And I'm supposed to be a CFA charter. So that was really the beginning of my path into real estate development and home building, because I realized that in this industry, you can beat the market. You can get outsized returns and build a really high degree of wealth if you play your cards right. You've got these informational asymmetries and different things that really help allow you to achieve that. So, that's kind of how I came into this business. I mean, I think, I took a completely different path, Ian, than a lot of guys, right? I mean, so many people come from the trades, and I'm kind of from the opposite angle. It's funny, I got in, and I, barely knew how to swing a hammer at that time, but I knew how to build pro formas and assess kind of business models and that kind of stuff. And so I think it was nice because I realized quickly enough after I screwed up, my first few projects trying to be the on-site superintendent myself, I realized I could hire a really talented team around me to shore up that weakness. And that's the way I came about it. But, it's, like I said, it's a completely different skill set than probably, the typical builder, but it's got its pros and cons. And I've tried to take the pros and use those to our advantage.
It's interesting that you bring up a pro forma. One of my first cracks at trying to become a manager of construction projects was to go work for an architect that I knew in New York who also was a real estate developer. He was almost like a real estate developer masquerading as an architect, but he did a lot of projects around the area we lived, and he brought me in, young, stupid, didn't know what I was doing, but I knew how to build stuff. And one of the first things he asked me to do was to write a pro forma for him. And I was like, what the hell is that? Well, you wanted me to like manage, construction workers and manage people on the project, but man, that was baptism by fire the first time I had to bring one of those in. So I'm
Oh,
sure
I
that helped.
imagine.
I'm sure that helped you out because for one, you had to be able to speak the language, right, of people who would be wanting to buy a $3 or $5 million house from you, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I, never really thought about that before, but I guess a lot of our buyers being more affluent types, I think they are familiar with that charter, and a lot of them come in from the finance or, industry adjacent to that, and I think I speak the same language as them. So it's actually probably helped me not just with investors and putting deals together, but probably on the custom building side too, just being able to speak the language of a lot of the customers that we build for.
And how has that been different with somebody who comes directly to your company wanting you to build a home versus having to do the whole real estate selling game to a market-driven buyer coming in off the street?
Yeah, it's really two very different business models. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners know that and have experienced that. And it's kind of, it's not really as you would think on the surface, because you think, well, you're building homes, so it's really the same. But I mean, building and developing a speculative home is very different from managing the client acquisition and client management process through the whole, through a custom build. And, when I first did my first few customs, I was probably kind of similar to your experience. It was almost like baptism by fire, where I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that I liked the risk profile of custom home building compared to spec. So I thought, okay, from a portfolio management standpoint, it makes sense to have a little bit of both. Keeps me, from getting too overexposed on the spec side. And so I really had no business building for my first few custom clients, and got up that learning curve pretty quickly. But it was definitely something that I was not used to and really had no training in when I first got into that.
Did that experience help you develop a team of people around you that were professionals already in that arena?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny, Ian, because my first probably 4 or 5 years in this business was just, a comedy of errors. It was just one folly after the other. I was lucky that we're still making money, but there's no real playbook to being a successful home builder. I mean, most of us get into this and we don't have the right mentorship and the right experience or coaching, or and so that you open to a ton of problems. And I mean, I think my first few years in the business, one of the big things, to your point or your question, was I was just hiring. I just thought, okay, warm body. You want to be a construction manager? You're hired. And I realized after, unfortunately, making some bad hires and having to let some people go, and bearing the heavy burden of a bad hire, how important it is to build a team of A-plus people around you. And I think around that time, after I'd made a few really bad decisions, I found that Jim Collins book, From Good to Great, and that's one of the core tenets that he teaches in there. And so that was like a real pivotal moment for me. I thought, okay, I got to get, as you said, like a real core team of people around me that can really help me grow the business as opposed to being a weight.
Hey, you made a comment there about people needing a coach, right? Needing somebody to help them through some of the mistakes that they're going to make. And you started the Building Optimal podcast, with your expressed goal of providing free and accessible information to the industry. What drove you to do this when, by all rights, your business was booming at that point? Why take on the extra load?
Yeah, I'm a masochist, so I like taking on more work than I can handle. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are the same. I think that for me, it's kind of going back to my first 4 or 5 years in the business were just really tough. I had no mentorship, and I built a really deep knowledge over those when I started the podcast. I guess I had 10 years in the business at that point. deep knowledge, had a lot of connections here in Austin locally, and then in other parts of the country, different builder peers, colleagues, and a lot of new people that were getting into the business and coming and asking me questions. And I realized how many people, the more conversations I had, the more I realized everybody repeats the same damn mistakes. It is wild how you go sit down with a handful of builders and you hear their struggles, and it's like, wow, I'm either there right now or I had that struggle a few years ago and it took me way too long, but I finally figured it out. Like, everybody goes through the same kind of trials by fire. Everybody seems to make the same stupid decisions, thinking it makes sense at one point, and then you realize, all right, well, that wasn't a great decision. Let's iterate and pivot. So that was when I realized, like, you know what? I'm going to take this knowledge I've accumulated, which is by no means perfect, and I'm going to go out and share it to the best of my ability with others, and hopefully help other people avoid the same mistakes that I've made and that so many of us are making. Because, it's a small community, it's a small fraternity at the end of the day. I mean, we all have the same struggles. We're in the trenches together, even though we might be competitors in certain markets. First and foremost, we're peers. And at least in Austin, I think we all play pretty nice. And I, want to do what I can to try to help everybody else that's in the same business and industry that I've chosen, which is a wonderful industry. It's just freaking hard. And we just need all the help we can get. And, podcast being kind of quick, easy, listen to it between job sites, free. That to me just seemed like a really nice vehicle to help other guys in our field get some knowledge and get up that learning curve.
So I found the Building Optimal podcast pretty early in its existence when you did a 3-part series with our mutual friend David Gerstel discussing the advice that he gives in his books, running a successful construction company, which he likes to shorten into the acronym of RISK. And he's got a nice California kind of drawl way of making the acronym sound like RISK, and his other book, Nail Your Numbers. But you did future episodes with attorneys and accountants and sales consultants and an insurance broker. What is it about a meeting with your insurance broker that makes you think, man, that'll make a great podcast? I got to put that content out there.
It may actually be the opposite. It's that I know it's going to make for a really boring, grudging podcast, but I know that it's all the more necessary because of that. There's some great podcasts out there. I mean, Fine Homebuilding podcast. Some of the other guys out there that we all know have some incredible content that they put out, really helping advance the thinking and the industry in general. For us, Building Optimal, I wanted to fill a little bit different niche and focus on, yes, to some extent, building techniques, building ideas, but probably a little bit from more of a higher level in terms of how it relates to your strategy and how you can make money and build, a brand and a business around that. But, as much as that, around business ideas too, that we're all struggling with. And that's, most of us don't want, it's a lot more fun to go listen to Reisinger talk about a building science topic than it is to hear somebody talk about, all these different risks that you have with your insurance policy. But I knew it was necessary. And so that's really why I'm just looking for the issues that seem to creep up and can cause problems for our community of builders and contractors, and try to illuminate those for our community, figure out how we can avoid them and just, have a better run, more successful business.
Just even speaking from my experience, when I started to read David's books and listen to your podcast, I was coming off of a 6 or 7 year stretch of running my own business, which, due to my youthful exuberance and total lack of business acumen, I ran promptly into the ground and went back to, work for other contractors that I knew. And it didn't take very long of working for somebody else where I got that itch to do something, more, and, building a company or teams, and maybe moving that knowledge base down to the next group of people. But That's something that I really enjoyed listening to, especially early on when you were doing these 3-part series. I think you did one with Sean Van Dyke about what types of employees you have in a company. Talk a little bit about those earlier kind of longer form series that you did with people like David and Sean.
Yeah, the podcast has evolved and actually continues to evolve. When we first got going, I had a very tactical approach to the information I wanted to provide to our audience. So it was very much the X's and O's of running a business, growing a business, scaling a business, not screwing up your business.
Yep.
All of that. We really wanted to focus on that. And there's a ton of things to talk about. We're about 100 episodes in now and certainly have not covered everything, but we covered so far, I feel like a lot of the big things, like kind of looking at this through the kind of 80-20 Pareto principle, I'd say, all right, we've covered, the majority of the things that I think are or the things that are going to provide the majority of the value. From here, our direction, I actually called this out in a recent podcast episode, that I want to shift the focus, not entirely, but a little bit, away from some of the tactical stuff, which I feel like we already have a good library of that information, and towards a little bit more of the innovations, opportunities that are coming into the industry, in terms of different, building science techniques, different practices, methods, materials, ideas, business niches, things like that are starting to emerge. Explore those a little bit more through the lens of, can I, as a small business owner, can we make sense of this? And is it something that we should consider bringing into our business, building our brand and hopefully making money while we're doing it, So that's a little bit of the direction that we're emphasizing more kind of in this latest evolution of the podcast. We'll always hold our roots as kind of probably a business forward, business first podcast. But that is something that's changed recently.
Yeah, you recently had Dan Colber and Jacob Rasmussen on talking a lot about low carbon building and some really in-depth high performance building stuff. Are you reacting to a market need or a market want for that, or is this just something that through your own self-discovery in running a business like Gossett and Company that you're bumping into and wanting to incorporate?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I've definitely seen a market need, as I'm sure so many of your listeners out there are as well. As much as that, I also think that most all of us that we get into this business, we're getting into it to, of course, make money. But as we also, I think, are all idealists to some extent. We want to build something that is meaningful. We want to build homes that are meaningful, ideally a legacy or a company that can be durable and can withstand the test of time. A lot of these are family-run businesses that I think, guys want to pass down. And so with that comes a different way of thinking also, which is, okay, how can we impart meaning and impact into what we're doing? And we're at such a crux at the moment, societally, globally. What we are doing as contractors and builders is very much front and center of the direction that this planet is going to go in the coming decade. With obviously the climate crisis, with the affordability crisis for homes, we've got major hurdles and major opportunity. And I want to help our community dissect some of that, because there's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of well-meaning people that are trying to figure out and solve these problems, and that's what it's going to take. But unfortunately, it's going to be one of those things where there's a lot of noise, and probably the majority of things may not make sense, may not achieve what they're intending, but there will be those things that are going to be kind of breakthrough innovations that we will find. And that's part of the new focus, is just dissecting new ideas and new opportunities to see what may make sense for all of us collectively, and then our listeners individually.
So thinking about the industry from the CFA perspective, what are some of the market and economic factors that affect the industry that you think are in a lot of contractors' blind spots right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say that there's probably a lot of different angles we could take that, but
it's a loaded question.
Yeah, look, I think that one of the things that we miss, and I lump myself into this category as well, we do not understand the full universe of risks that are bearing down upon our shoulders at any given time. And I think that to some extent we've got a little bit of we've seen more black swan events over the last few years than really probably in decades past. So between new black swan events that seem to be coming at an increasingly faster pace, and then just the blind spots, as you say, that are driven by the fact that you cannot really fully understand the full universe of risks in our business. We wear dozens of hats as small business owners and owners of contracting and building companies. We'd like to think that we have all the risks identified. One of the things I tell my clients, my custom clients on the projects that we take on, is I say, look, for us as a company, we're very systems focused. And with our experience, with the quality of our team, and with our systems, we approach every project as if a custom home has 10,000 questions that must get answered before you start. We can answer 98%. We feel like we can get to 98%, which we think is industry best. I am not convinced. I hold open the idea that maybe one day I'll change my opinion on this, but I am not convinced that you can get that final 2% ever really known. Custom home projects that have never been built on sites that are very unique, different teams, dynamics on every single project. I think that there are just simply unknowns we cannot understand. And so I think, to your point, understanding that there are blind spots, that we can only address so many, and always having that margin of safety that will allow you to absorb those unexpected situations that happen that you just can't really predict. And, we could get into, that's probably an entire podcast episode alone. How do you do that? But I think it's just important to understand that you can't know everything. And so how do you always maintain a fairly logical, rational stance in what you're doing, the activities you're taking on, and keeping that margin of safety with your profit margins, with your cash, with that can really be applied and extended to everything, with the quality of people that you hire and your clients. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest blind spots that I see from my experience, is just maybe taking a little bit more of an approach towards risk and risk management, and understanding that you don't fully comprehend the entire universe of unknowns.
One of the things that David Gerstel said to me, or maybe he wrote it in Nail Your Numbers as well, is I was approaching moving out of the field totally from an estimator, bean counter, number crunching kind of position. And he was like, no, that's not really what you're doing. You are assessing your employer's risk profile in a decision to take on a project. And I didn't really understand that at first, but the more that I went through the mechanism of producing estimates, trying to get on top of costs, and then going back to the finished project and actually seeing how my assumptions played through in the finished job, the more I did that total cycle, the more I started to understand what David meant of, like, you're there to assess the risk. Putting in a basement on one type of building lot is going to be a different risk profile than than doing one on a brand new subdivision out in, out north Austin somewhere. So is there anything that you do in your builds that on the estimating side that you focus on some of those specific risks and you're trying to answer 98% of the variables?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is so critical, and I'm completely in agreement with David's approach to that. One of the best ways I think that you can achieve what David is saying is to develop a real core competency in whatever you're doing and know your guardrails. This kind of goes back to the Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger approach, which is know your competencies, know what you don't know, and try to stick in those areas where you have paid the dues, where you have really developed that really core knowledge. And so, Ian, like to your point, you've got this incredible estimating knowledge, and you've gone through all these different cycles and feedback loops to where now you're, probably multiples more effective at what you do than the first time you did it.
Right.
That's that compounding effect of knowledge. So I think it's a real balance there because you obviously want to always be growing. And so I think that's important, but you also have to understand on the other side that every time you get outside your core zone, that the universe of question marks, those 10,000 question marks. So here's an example. In the city of Austin, if I'm building in our core areas where I know, with our trade base, with our architects and designers and people that we know, we can get to 98%. If someone came to me and said, I want you to build a house for us out in Westlake, which is actually just, not far from here, but we don't have much experience there, different jurisdiction, different soil conditions and topographies. Now, all of a sudden, I'm taking on more risk because I'm getting into something that's it's building a home. So yeah, it's, should be at my core competency on one hand, yes, but getting outside of certain experience zones that I have. And so if I do that, I've got to figure out how do I get my arms around that and account for that additional risk. Is it only taking on a project if you've got a higher profit margin or higher contingency that you can draw on? Is it bringing in an outside team that you can 100% rely on that knows that market? Something has to be done or adjusted every single time that you get outside of that core operating zone. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's really the way that we try to approach it.
Well, even different clients come with their own risk profiles too, right? Some clients you can see right off the bat they're going to be riskier to deal with. You're going to have more questions. Maybe they're going to struggle with selections, or they have too many ideas, and other ones probably come to you knowing exactly what they want, where they want it, and it's a pretty smooth ride, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for us, one of our core values is only working with great people, and that extends to clients. If we get any red flags about a client early on, we're out. I don't care if it's a really sexy project that's supposed to make a really good profit or a good fee, or be something that'll be nice and shiny on our portfolio page. I do not care. If it's a client that exhibits red flags, it is just not worth it, period. There are too many things that can drag you down your entire business in that process. It's just not worth it, in our opinion.
Yeah, you did an episode solely about red flags, if I remember right, and what to do with them. And I think that's probably the one I've shared with the most of my colleagues. Is like, this is exactly the way you got to deal with red flags. But it's so hard for people to back away from a deal, right?
Absolutely. And that right there it's like the siren singing, to the sailor on the rocks. I mean, it is so appealing. You want to go to it. And it just takes a tremendous amount of discipline and resolve to understand that you can't. And I mean, you didn't ask this question, but I'll share this with the listeners because this has been really helpful for us. One way to do that, to take it out of like a decision or a discipline, because it's hard to have discipline, but what we've done is we've basically codified certain things, decisions in our business. core values. This is what we do, and all of our team knows it. And if someone gets caught going off script from our core values, we get called out. And so we know that we do not work with asshole clients. We don't take on the red flags. So if we're a little bit skinny on a project or whatever, and we feel like, gosh, it sure would be nice to have this start. Let's get this, slotted in. It'll be fine. It's probably going to be okay. We'll figure it out with them as we go on. Let's just get this start and get it plugged in. We have that codified into our company where it says, you know what? It doesn't matter. This is code for us. You don't do it. It is biblical scripture. Don't do it. And I think that's really important. I think having those things written in stone that a company does not waver from is really important to keep you on track, because you get sidetracked by the shiny object.
Yep.
By the idea of, all right, you know what, this is going to be a great project for our portfolio page. Yeah, the client is sure kind of squirrely. We don't really like the way that they treated us in this meeting or whatever. They sure seem kind of untrusting in this way or not. And, but it'll be okay because this will be a great portfolio project. Well, the upside is almost never worth the downside. So do you really want to take that on? Because the downside is possible litigation. One of the most undervalued things with taking on even just like mediocre clients, we just will take on great ones, good ones and great ones. Even with a mediocre client, the issue is, which you don't factor in, the mental effect it has on your team. The guys that are in the field who's having to deal with that person, that's just a little bit toxic to them. Maybe they're not litigious. Maybe it's not that, but it's just, or blowing them up with just, taking all of their time to try to deal with and manage this client. What you don't factor in is the mental toll it takes on that person, how it affects them downstream on their other projects. And we as business owners have to be champions for our people, for our team. And I think that's a way to build a really winning culture. And whenever you don't, and you just let somebody get, ripped to shred by the wolves, then that's going to develop, that's going to kind of breed some, cancerous cells down the line. And who knows how that manifests, but it's not, it's just not a good way to run your business, I think.
One of the things I've realized pretty recently was if a client is sending me emails at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, they're also going to do that to the project manager. They're going to do that to the lead carpenter. They're going to do that to the other trades working on the job. And, maybe my position in the company means that I have to deal with it, but theirs doesn't. So, is that a red flag that I need to be, more on top of? Is that something I got to try and control when we're in our sales and development process? For sure. Because like you said, it can affect them not just on the day that they're, waking up to their phone screen blowing up at 1 o'clock in the morning, but it's going to drag them down on the next one. And then they're going to start thinking and looking for those red flags themselves when that's really my role, is to clear the path of those for an employee. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure you guys do this, but setting expectations in our world is key, and explaining up front. We got this pre-construction guide that we require every client to review and sign off on before we start. And one thing in there is, here is our preferred communication. We're going to have established weekly meetings with you all. We prefer to contain all communication in there. For whatever reason, something is timely. Email us. Our preference is email, so we can keep good track records. And our business hours are 8:30 to 5:30, Monday to Friday. That's when we will respond. We don't respond on nights or weekends. It's family time for us. So if you don't set those expectations up front, and then, by the way, follow them. And I'm not good.
Don't break them.
So I work nights and weekends, which is not good, by the way.
Yep.
But that's what I do, and so I will find myself starting a really bad precedent with clients where I will still respond. So they sign off on this pre-construction guide, right? And then I am inconsistent by actually breaking that. And so been working to get a lot better at that, to really stick within those business hours, because it's about setting expectations and communication, but then also just being consistent from there.
Yeah. Got to schedule, send those emails so they all fire off at 8:45 on Monday when you're working on a Saturday, right?
Oh man, I love that. The Gmail schedule send is one of the best inventions in years. I love it.
You mentioned the guides, and you have a lot of guides for your different systems that you use in the business available on the Building Optimal website. What systems and processes have you developed outside of the ones that you just mentioned that you believe would benefit all other builders, and why do you see this systems-based approach as something that's so important in the success of a construction business?
Yeah, we try to systemize everything we can. I mean, that beating a dead horse talking about core values, that is another one of our core values, is trying to systemize everything. So we're always working every year to develop more and improve existing systems. But for us, everything that we can create into a sequential or understood process, and to-do lists and calendars and triggers, almost like algorithms, is extremely valuable for us, because, who knows, at some point we might want to scale beyond our current city. Maybe not, I don't know. But, those kinds of things are critical for a really well-run business, or scalable companies that can be basically handed off. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, we want the company to keep running from there. And most of us don't have a company that can do that. So we have a system for just about everything from sales to construction to purchasing, administrative systems. We've put some of those for sale on the Building Optimal website. But, I think for me, the reason why that's so important, I'm just a systems guy in general, Ian. I just like it for, even outside of my business. But especially for home building, the reason why it's so important is because, look, we're a downside business. After you sign that contract with the client, I don't care what people say about, okay, well, you can get change orders and make some additional profit margin. Whatever, put that aside. It is all downhill from there. It is downside from the time you sign that contract. And our goal is X's and O's and blocking and tackling to try to keep as much of that margin as we can, while building to the plan specs quality that we need to and want to, and keeping that client happy, and doing a bunch of other things. There's a ton of competing factors there. And there are a bunch of things that, as we all know, can go wrong, that start eroding that margin. And the plight of the contractor and home builder is just that. We usually start off a project with probably a reasonable profit margin. Not always, but many people do. And most of the issues is that people are operating at very low profit margins in this industry, and it usually happens through erosion during the project. And having a really systems-focused company from start to finish helps put those processes in place to prevent that, to execute at a high level. And that's what it takes to make money in this business.
I like your X's and your X's and O's. That's a really interesting way to look at it, from that we signed the deal, now we just really need to execute. That's right. It's a very, very visceral kind of thing, and it makes me think of my dad yelling at the TV watching football about all the north-south running versus east and west running. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, they're just running up and down. They're not going anywhere. But we do that an awful lot in this business, and give away things for free, or purely work for a wage and not a profit. It's just something that's very endemic in this business.
Yeah.
So on top of that, what piece of advice would you give a builder who's struggling to scale up their business? I know you offer a lot of consulting type services outside of running a home building business and a podcast and everything else that you do. But what do you think is key for scaling up?
Yeah, I think that somebody who's struggling in their business right now, like the really ugly truth is that most of us who are struggling in our business have not just, one problem that's contributing to that, but a whole host. And so it's not just a single diagnosis. Unfortunately, I wish it was. But it's, an unraveling of things and trying to get to either the root problem or that lead domino that needs to fall. My first company that I started, a few years into it, that's what we were doing. We were struggling and we were looking at, okay, what's wrong? Well, we were charging way too low of a fee. I was an idiot and I was using commercial real estate development percentages for the fees we were charging. I'd never seen a textbook on, home building percentages. And so I just took that, and I was in my late 20s, and applied that to home building and didn't realize that that's like a quarter of what you should be charging. So I was young and dumb. And so, we weren't charging enough money. We had really good profitable projects on the spec side, but I was paying my investors way too much, again, not charging nearly enough of a fee. Had no idea what we were doing. We were just in growth mode, trying to do as many projects as we could, hired, a lot of the wrong people. Probably had some fairly incompatible dynamics between me and my partner on that project. Got along well, but running a partnership together is hard. So that added a completely different. So I mean, there were so many things to unravel there. Where do you really start? The solution on that business, believe it or not, was to do what we did, which was shut it down, go our separate ways, and start new. And we really started making the money that we needed to and wanted to after that. Took all the lessons from those first few years and pivoted. So I guess to bring my answer back down to earth, it's you got to identify the problem. You got to start asking questions. The scientific method we learned in elementary school is amazingly underappreciated. You got to start asking questions, asking the right questions, and really trying to get down to the root of the problem to figure out what is that first domino that should fall. If David Gerstel was on here right now, he'd say, one of the biggest things, and I agree with, is people just not understanding the numbers of their business and not knowing how to properly estimate, like what you do, Ian. And I mean, that's one of the most critical functions of an entire home building company, because again, when you get that budget established and set that number, if you're off, you're screwed. You can't. I mean, so it's all downhill from there. So I mean, that's one of the big things, is making sure that you really understand your numbers, that you know the right fees and costs and overheads to be applying and charging. And then from there, it's a game of execution, systems, communication, and execution. So that's a pretty broad answer, but I mean, I'll just go back and leave it at the fact that it's, it's about asking the right questions and identifying that root problem that needs to get focused on first.
That dovetails with one of the best pieces of advice I got when I really transitioned into management. I think it was as a commercial foreman level, and I don't remember who gave me the advice anymore, but the advice at its basic root was, if you're going to solve a problem, you have to first make sure that you are not the root cause of the problem. And until you've done that, any attempt to solve the problem is wasted time. You have to eliminate yourself first. And I think you kind of said that in a very roundabout way of figuring out what those problems are and then attacking them. But for me, that's the filter I look through when I approach a problem. Like, is this particular employee underperforming because I haven't given them what they need, or I haven't done this for them, or I haven't created the right culture? And until I go through that exercise, it's not even worthwhile for me to bring them into the office.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice. That's hard for a lot of people to do, right?
Oh, yeah, especially in this business.
Yeah, we've got that ego as builders, and we also just, human nature, you've got that cognitive dissonance where it's hard to accept the fact that you are the problem. Yeah. But oftentimes we do get in our own way. I have experienced that too many times myself.
Yeah. So what excites you about the future of the industry, the direction it's going?
Yeah. Touched on it a little bit earlier, but and that's part of why I'm adjusting some of the direction of building optimal, because we have an opportunity as an industry right now to help solve some of the biggest, most pressing needs that society has faced in decades, if ever. And the new stuff, the investment and the focus on figuring out how to build more sustainable homes, more affordable homes, I'm all in on that. I'm excited to see how that goes. For my company here in Austin, we have a real focus and a niche in wellness enhancing homes. How do we, stop building homes that really contribute to sickness, which a lot of the homes that we live in across this country right now do, unfortunately. How do we backpedal from that? And then how do we actually not just build homes that are, neutral, but enhancing to our health? So I think that's going to be a really big niche that's going to be coming in. It already is. We're seeing in our business and getting a lot of press and publicity for our efforts on that. That's something. And I mean, I don't know. There's a bunch that's got me excited. All the flavor of the year right now is the AI stuff. I don't know if you've played around with Chat GPT and all that, but it's going to be amazing what AI is going to do in our industry in the next few years. I think that probably before long we're going to have some programs where we can go upload our plans and have like interior design and selections packages probably produced in a matter of minutes off of AI and prompt engineering and different things that assess what's popular, looks at our budget and just can figure it all out for us. So
it gives you 4 or 5 options for somebody to pick from based on, different cost parameters and different design ideas.
Yeah. We're probably too late to the party on that. I've got a good buddy who's a Stanford trained engineer and exited a company a few years ago. And I've been trying to coerce him into doing something like that. Just giving me a tiny piece of the pie.
Yeah. Just take the idea and run with it. Just remember me when you get there.
Exactly. Yeah. But that, those are probably already in the works, truth be told. But yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff that can be done with AI right now. And, some of the guys I follow talking about how, we're in so much debt, as a country and globally, that this AI is really going to be something that can help us improve our productivity to help us climb out of this really voracious debt cycle that we've found ourselves in. So I think the same thing goes on building and construction. It's going to be some cool developments and innovations coming in a very short time.
So in addition to sitting around thinking up ideas to do with AI and owning a company and hosting a podcast, you also do some pretty heavy philanthropic work in the U.S. and Latin America. Where did this decision to give back to the community come from, and what are some of the programs that you're involved in?
Yeah, I knew that I wanted to create a nonprofit that helps people harness the power of entrepreneurship and more specifically small business ownership and changing their lives. I've known that since college. I had that idea back then, and was just waiting for the right time. Needed to get myself established in my business in my 20s and early 30s. And about, I guess, 7 years ago now, I partnered with a UT professor to help create this program to do just that. We teach entrepreneurship to people in vulnerable areas. We've really focused a lot on Latin America in recent years. We have had some programs in Austin and South Texas as well, but we believe that is one of the best keys for wealth creation that exists in the free market. And as a small business owner myself and a home builder, I see people who can make a great living, plumbers who can get independently wealthy, electricians who can live, as well as just about anybody else, contractors, home builders. We have a wonderful industry that isn't going away anytime soon. It's going to be around for as long as we can envision. And I wanted to help people plug into a small business ownership and be into some of these great businesses that you can start kind of in our world, in our industry. And so that's what we do. And we teach these, we have some online classes and courses. We have weekend seminars. We slowed down on the weekend seminars over COVID because Latin America shut down a lot more heavily than we did here in Texas. And so we're just now really getting back on our feet and getting some of those programs rolled out, and hopefully Mexico and Colombia this year. But, it's a small organization. We got a little office in Ibagué, Colombia, small team down there, and we just focus on helping people improve their economic mobility through business.
So it's been great having you on, especially after years of listening to you and stuff that I've learned from the people that you've had on the show and yourself, topics that you've gone over. Is there anything you want to tell or ask our audience before we go, and where can they find out more about some of the work that you're involved in?
Yeah, our website for my home building company is gossettco.com. My last name, GOSSETTCO.com. We're on Instagram as well. My nonprofit is exponencialistas.com, which is exponencialistas.com. A little bit hard for us Americans to say. But anyway, those are my two websites. And of course, buildingoptimal.com is the podcast. No, I don't think I have anything other than I'm excited to flip the script and put you on the hot seat here in a few weeks on the Building Optimal podcast.
Yeah, and I look forward to it. I look forward to whatever we decide to center the conversation around. But hopefully you getting to talk to me has given you a few ideas now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, thanks for having me on, Ian. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Jared, thanks for taking the time to join me today, and thanks to everybody for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Please like, comment, or review us wherever you're listening. Helps others find our podcast. Thanks again, everybody.